At first I thought to join old acquaintances, but I felt intuitively this was not the right thing to do. So all the way down and on entering the town, I prayed for the Father's direction and help in finding accommodation. I had no money and would not beg. As I walked the street, a woman of middle years came towards me, heavily laden with baskets on her arms. Her countenance was sorrowful. It seemed she had been crying. On impulse, I stopped her and asked where I might find accommodation. She said briefly that she would normally offer me a bed, but she had a very sick son at home. She added that she had been to buy provisions to feed the comforters, who had already gathered to mourn when her son died. My heart grieved for her, but also rejoiced. Straightway I had been led to someone I could help. I expressed my sympathy and offered to carry her baskets to her house. She looked at me for a moment, wondering who I might be, but was apparently satisfied by my appearance and demeanor. On the way, I said I could probably help her son. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. I replied that I had received no medical training, but nonetheless I could help him. On reaching her house, large and well built of stone, indicating social standing and prosperity, she took me to her husband, saying, "This man says he can help our son." He nodded morosely, but said nothing. The woman, Miriam, drew me away, saying he was distressed and very angry. "The boy is our only son amongst many daughters, and he is blaming God for giving the child the sickness." Miriam wept. "If he speaks like this against God, what other troubles will be heaped upon us, I wonder?" "Take comfort," I said. "Shortly your son will be well again." She looked doubtful, but led me to the room in which the boy lay. It was hot and stifling, and filled with gloomy, talkative well-wishers. I asked the mother to clear the room, but the visitors were resistant. They wanted to see what would be done, and only left reluctantly when Miriam called her husband to speak to them. I could hear them arguing with the father in the next room. What did he think this man could do if the doctor had been unable to help the boy? The father came into the room to see for himself. His son was deathly pale and had a high fever. The mother explained he could not keep his food down and had loose bowels. He had been like that for several days and had lost so much weight the doctor had said nothing more could be done for him. He would probably die. I placed my hands on the boy's head and prayed, knowing and silently giving heartfelt thanks that the father life would flow down through my hands and into his body. Thus the healing work would be accomplished. I felt extreme heat and a tingling vibration in my hands, and the power pouring into his frail body. I was overcome with joyous thanksgiving. How great, how wonderful was the father life when released to do its natural work of healing. His father and mother, looking anxious, wondering what would happen next, held each other's hands and watched intently. As they saw their son's color gradually change from white to a more healthy glow, they exclaimed in astonishment and delight. After some time, the boy looked up at me and said brightly, "Thank you. I am well now. I am hungry and want something to eat." His mother laughed with happiness and held him close, but also looked apprehensive. "I cannot give you food, my son. The doctor will be angry." She had been warned to starve him of all but water. I smiled and said, "He is cured. You can give him bread and wine, and he will keep it down." His father, Zedekiah, was all amazed joy and gratitude. After embracing his beloved son, he turned to me and wrung my hands warmly. He kept patting my shoulder but shaking his head, unable to speak for the tears which were running down his cheeks. When he had largely recovered his composure, he went through to the living room and said to the people there, "My son, almost dead, has been returned to fullness of life again." His words were met with a great clamor of jubilation, excitement, disbelief, questioning, laughter, and congratulations. The boy's mother stood there, her face wreathed in smiles. After that, there was no question of needing accommodation. When Zedekiah told the astonished comforters that the boy was cured, and the youth himself appeared smiling at the door and asked, yet again, for food, the well-wishers one and all gathered around me and invited me to their homes. However, I preferred to remain with the boy's father, who now said he had many questions to ask me. He hoped I could answer them. After food and wine were placed on the table and everyone was invited to eat their fill, Zedekiah sat down and asked his first question. He said, "You have done something no priest or doctor could do. Healing only comes of God. Although you are a stranger, I perceive you must come from God." "Yes," I said, and the people murmured wonderingly. "This illness which has come upon my son, was this a punishment for something I have done wrong in the past? And how could I commit so grievous a sin that God should want to take my only son from me?" Many of the people nodded when they heard these words. "You have asked the question I most want to answer, Zedekiah. God gives us life and being. He would not snatch these away as a man would snatch some treasure from another man because he is angry with him. This is the way that mankind behaves, not God, and God is not placed on a throne in some part of the sky, like human kings sit on thrones and govern their people. This is the human way and a human belief, not truth. The way of God is far beyond anything the human mind can devise or dream about. I alone have seen that which has brought us into being, and I know that it is not the kind of God taught by the rabbis. I saw that it is perfect love, and for this reason I would rather speak of the Father, for I have seen that it works within every living thing, keeping them in a good state of health, even as a human father works to keep his children well fed, clothed, and protected within the shelter of a home. I have seen it within everything in the world." "How can that be?" a man asked doubtfully. "It is not possible for an individual being of any kind to be everywhere at once, but the air is everywhere, although we cannot see it. Nonetheless, we know and do not doubt it is very real and very important to our existence. If there were no air and we could not breathe it, we would die. The movement of air, which we call wind, we cannot see, but we can see it agitate the leaves and drive the clouds across the sky. So we know the air is around and above us and is strong. And now I would ask you, what is the most real and valuable part of a man, his body or his mind?" Some answered it was the body. Otherwise he would have no place on earth, could not work, could not be seen, would not be known. Others said they thought that his mind was more important than his body, and I answered, "His mind is the most important part of him, since without his mind he could not power his body. He would not eat, drink, sleep, move, plan, or live. Yet we cannot see mind. We can only know we have a mind because of the thoughts it produces and because the thoughts fashion some kind of action in our lives. We believe mind works through the brain. Yes, it does. For how could brain born of flesh produce thoughts, feelings, ideas, plans? And now it should be clear to you that this is how the Father is present within all things. It is the directing mind behind the human mind, working its great works within every living thing. We know this is so, for we see the marvels it brings about. We see the growth of children. We see the food they eat miraculously changed into another substance which nourishes and makes them grow. How this happens, we do not begin to know or even imagine. Even if we did know, we would still not know what set such an important life process to work in living bodies of every species. See how wonderfully the bodies of each species is fashioned and created purposefully, expressly to transform the kind of food they eat into nourishment to grow bone, blood, and flesh. "Now you show us these things, we can see they are truly marvelous," a young man exclaimed. They are. We see the young bodies going through their various stages of development, and we see their minds keeping pace with their physical development until the youths and maidens begin to long to find a spouse and to become parents themselves. Then the great work of conception is accomplished, and the growth of seed within the womb continues until it comes forth as a full-term child. Think, who determines all this steady, orderly growth within the woman? From whence comes the plans which govern the right development of head, body, and limbs, and are unvarying from one woman to another, and from one species to another? Who decides the exact moment when birth shall begin, the physical means by which the child shall be brought forth from the womb, the provision of milk for the child? Think, is this the mother? No, it is not the mother. She is but witness of all that takes place in her from the moment her husband has been to her and planted his seed to join with hers. Does God do all these things from afar? Do his thoughts reach out to each man and woman and decide when these things shall take place? No. All this work is accomplished by the creative mind power, the intelligently loving life within every living thing. We see the parents' love of their young, be they bird, animal, and man. Where does this love come from? It is drawn from the creative mind power, perfect love, of the Father within us. It is because the Father does the work within the plants, the trees, the birds, animals, and man himself, that we are here today, living, breathing, eating, sleeping, having children, growing old, and then dying to pass on to some more happy place. All of this is the work of the Father active within us. How can you possibly deny the truth of all I have said tonight? Today you saw a dying youth brought back to fullness of life again within a short time. Was it I who healed him? Not at all. Of myself I can do nothing. It was the life that is the Father active within all things which came in full force to repair an ailing body and bring it back to full health again, because I believed it would and did not doubt. There were sighs of satisfaction in the room. New light, new interest, even new gentleness showed in their faces. Why then does man suffer so grievously? Miriam asked. Because when man is begotten, when life takes on form within the seed, it takes on the humanhood which separates it from every other individual in the world, to make it single, a lone figure, joined to none other, solitary, private, its own person. It becomes subject to, is controlled by, two mightily strong impulses in his earthly nature, to hold fast to all things he greatly desires, and to reject and push away all that he does not want. These two most basic impulses in man underlie every single thing he does throughout his life, and are entirely responsible for the trouble man brings upon himself. Although the Father is active within man, it has nothing of humanhood in it. Therefore, the Father holds nothing, rejects nothing, condemns nothing, does not even see wrongdoing. All that man does which man calls sin is only of this world, and is only punished within this world. For it is a law of earthly existence, as you know, that whatever you sow, you will reap as a like harvest. Because he draws life and mind from the Father, man himself is creative in thought, words, and deeds. Whatever he thinks, says, does, and believes returns to him in like form some time later. There is no punishment from the Father. Whatever ills come to mankind is of their own making entirely. People murmured that this was a new teaching altogether, and yet it made greater sense than all that they had been taught before. Several voices urged me to tell them more. I tell you, in me you have seen the life active as healing. Follow me, and you will hear of the path you must walk to find happiness. In my words will you find the truth of existence, never yet revealed by any other man. It has been said of the Messiah, he will utter secrets hidden from the beginning of creation. I tell you truly, These secrets you will hear from me. If you listen carefully and grasp their meaning, and practice their truth and hold fast to their laws, you will be made new and will enter into the kingdom of heaven." After I had spoken, the people were quiet for a moment, and then there was a clamor of excited talk. But Zedekiah stood up and said it was time for the household to settle down. His boy needed sleep, and his wife and daughters, too, were weary after all their weeping. It was arranged that the next morning I should go down to the harbor, and sick people would be brought to me. Thus I was able to launch my mission, and everything was speedily arranged for me in the best possible way. It seemed that if I did not heal, there would be no interest in and no acceptance of all I had to tell them. Healing demonstrated the truth of what I wanted to teach, and my teachings would explain the reasons why I was able to bring them healing from the Father. When I woke the next morning, I felt joyously alive with the expectation of wondrous things to come. After I had broken my fast, I set out with Zedekiah toward the town harbor, my heart aglow with love for everyone I passed. I greeted them warmly, telling them I had good news for those who wanted to hear it. When I reached the jetty, I found men, women, and children seated on the ground, awaiting my arrival. Some held out their hands to me imploringly. These looked very ill, some were crippled, many were covered in sores. My heart still ached for their pitiful state, but now I could also rejoice because I knew it was not the Father's will that they should be like this. Quite the contrary. The Father was itself all healing, all health, all fitness. I had proved this the night before and in my home. I exulted that I would be able to demonstrate this wonderful truth to the crowds now gathering around me. One sad old face caught my attention. She was wrinkled and thin and crooked. I went to her, and kneeling beside her, I placed my hands on her head and immediately felt the flow of Father power through my hands, vibrating through her head until her whole body shook with the life force, energizing her limbs. People watching this were astonished and wondered what I might be doing to her, but others quieted their objection. Gradually, her limbs began to unbend, lengthen, straighten. Her face became alive with the joy of returning strength. I helped her to stand up. Then she stood proudly by herself. She was so overcome with happiness she began to weep, then laughed and danced, calling out to people. "Praise God," she said, "praise God." And others standing there took up the refrain. They were all deeply moved by what they had seen. The crush of people pressing in against my person was so great, Zedekiah had offered to control them. In orderly fashion, assisted by other eager onlookers, he marshaled the sick toward me that I might attend to them, according to their deepest need. At last, feeling tired, my host invited me back to his house to dine. He sent away those whom I had not been able to heal for lack of time. He assured them I would return the following day. It was a festive evening, so much to talk about, so much to celebrate, so much to teach, so much to learn. All of it certainly good news, the people agreed. I knew that by many I was accepted as speaking truly of what I had seen in the desert. And so it continued for many days. People came to see me from far and wide. Zedekiah and others of his friends helped me to control the crowds to enable me to heal and teach. The people listened gladly. They were talking amongst themselves about the Father and were eager to learn more about the thongs and chains which bound people in misery. The crush became so great I soon realized I would have to find my own helpers on whom I could rely to assist me. It was time for Zedekiah to return to conduct his leather business, which he had been neglecting.